everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here. So thanks so much for the invitation on behalf of Child Rights Connect. I'm going to start sharing my screen so that you can perhaps follow the presentation that I've prepared. Let me start it now. Voila. So before going into the subject matter, just 2 words on Child Rights Connect for those of you who might not be so familiar with our organization. It is an international network of civil society organizations. We have around 90 members worldwide, including CRC Asia. Different types of members between national, small NGOs and big international NGOs like Save the Children, for example, or other similar organizations. And our mission is very straightforward. It is about creating space for civil society, including children, at the UN. What we do is really try to connect civil society on the ground to the UN human rights mechanisms in order for civil society to advance children's rights in their own countries and realities. We have been working on child human rights defenders since a few years now. We have been the ones who brought this issue or attention to this group of children, rather, to the UN and the international community for the very first time back in 2018, when we collaborated with the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child on its day of general discussion, which focused entirely on the promotion of the rights of child human rights defenders. And before then, let's say, it was not a terminology that was systematically or regularly applied to children. You may all be yourself using other type of terminology when it comes to children promoting human rights, for example, actors for change, child activists, or similar other terms. With our advocacy and with the day of general discussions, we started to raise awareness on why this terminology, child human rights defenders, or more broadly, human rights defenders, exist, where it comes from, and what it brings when you use it, especially when you use it in the context of advocacy with the UN, in the context of a standard setting, for example. But before going into this, let me give you some examples, concrete examples of who are child human rights defenders. And this is just a very short list. Doesn't exist an exhaustive list. So take it just, you know, as a way of giving a sense of what we are talking about. So the first example is a child member of a children's parliament who conducts advocacy work at the national level, engaging with their government around respecting and implementing the state's obligations, human rights obligations. Another one is a child who raises awareness on children's rights and human rights among their peers. Another one is a child who seeks justice for the violation of their rights to promote broader reforms in the public interest. A child who participates or takes part in peaceful assemblies to protest against injustices and stand up for human rights. And finally, a child who monitors the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of the Child and submits alternative reports to the committee. So this is just a short range of examples that I'm sure we all know, we all came across with. And these are all children that fall within the definition of human rights defenders. So where this definition comes from, there is a very important tool which I would really like today to promote it as an advocacy tool for your own use, which is the UN Declaration on Human Rights Defenders. In my PowerPoint, I've put all the links, the relevant links to the different resources, including the declaration, so you can easily access it after today's workshop. The declaration, it has been adopted 24 years ago by the UN General Assembly by consensus. So it expresses a very strong political consensus on the rights of human rights defenders. And Article 1 of this declaration is the basis for the definition of human rights defenders. And so as you can read here, and I will read it out now, everyone has the right individually and in association with others to promote and to strive for the protection and realization of human rights and fundamental freedoms at the national and international levels. So as you may see and notice, the declaration itself doesn't use or mention explicitly the terminology human rights defenders. Talks just about the right of everyone, meaning children, adult, no matter the age, to promote human rights. But the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defenders, who is a very important human rights mechanism of the United Nations, and who works on the implementation of the declaration together with states, with civil society, with all relevant stakeholders, has come up with let's say a commonly used definition of human rights defenders, which you can find on the website of the Special Rapporteur. So the Special Rapporteur said that the human rights defenders is any person who individually or with others act peacefully, and this is basically the only duty or requirement of human rights defenders, to act peacefully, to promote and protect human rights in accordance with the Declaration on Human Rights Defenders. And what we realized, that although many, if not most of the children who our network, our partners work with, fall within this definition of human rights defenders, most of them were absolutely ignorant, not knowledgeable, not even knowing of the existence of this UN Declaration on Human Rights Defenders. And also this was very much the case, for example, of the child rights organizations who are supporting advocacy by children at the national level. And so we started to promote awareness about this declaration, to promote an understanding of why a declaration is relevant and is important for children, in particular child human rights defenders. And there is a very important acknowledgement to make, that there are very different aspects, there are very different elements for child human rights defenders in comparison to adult defenders that must be taken into account. And the very first one is that child human rights defenders have additional and specific rights based on the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. The child human rights defenders face additional barriers when it comes to exercising their rights as defenders. They experience specific violations, different types of violations, because of their status in society. They have less access to information and resources. They have less support when it comes to exercising their rights. And most and foremost, they are often, if not always, reliant on adults when it comes to empowerment and protection. So I would like to share with you now a guide that we have developed on the rights of child human rights defenders. And we have a version for all and a child-friendly version as well, specific for children. This guide is a comprehensive guide that explains all the relevant rights of child human rights defenders. So we tried to compile there all the basics that you should know about the rights of child human rights defenders. And I'm happy to share that this guide has already been translated in Thai by UNICEF Thailand, who has taken the initiative to do that. And we hope that this can be replicated in other countries in Asia, because for now it is available in English, French, and Spanish, both the original version and the child-friendly version. But we hope that it can be further translated into national languages, and in particular in countries in Asia, so that it can be easier to use it at the national level. And I forgot to mention that the Declaration of Human Rights Defenders is available in many of the national languages of countries in Asia. So that is something that is already being translated quite broadly. So I would just now, without going too much into the substance of the guide, because as I said, it's a very quite long, comprehensive guide, but let me give you a sense of the purpose of the main purpose of this guide, which is explaining why the declaration, how the declaration can strengthen the implementation of the CRC. It is a very useful tool to do that, because it clarifies, it doesn't create new obligations, but it clarifies and strengthens very much those that are in the CRC. For example, when it comes to education's rights, it is very strong on human rights educations. And Article 16 talks about the very important role that human rights defenders play in contributing to awareness raising, for example, around human rights and fundamental freedoms, something that children, a role that children very much play when it comes to education, peer education, and awareness raising among their peers on human rights. And so with the declaration, you can really highlight the positive role, for example, that children play, and the support that they need when they do this type of activities, for example, from schools. And we very much know, we have very much seen many examples of schools punishing child human rights defenders for this type of actions instead of supporting them. So use the declaration to counter those punishments and try to create an enabling environment in schools, for example, for them to act. Another example is the political participation. You all know that the CRC is quite silent and not very strong on political participation. So Article 8 of the declaration can be very useful to strengthen the political participation rights of children, because it states very, very clearly and very much in line with the international Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, that everyone has a right, individually and in association with others, to have access to participation in the government of their countries. Whether or not they have the right to vote or not, everyone should have access. And this includes submitting a criticism and proposal for improving their functioning. So this is a very explicit language, that can strengthen, for example, Article 12 of the CRC and the right to be heard of children. Protection from harm, another very important element when it comes to the right of child human rights defenders. The guide clarifies that children are entitled to special measures of protection when it comes to acting as human rights defenders, both online and offline. And the guide explains how much the online environment is a place for human rights violations for children. It also states very clearly that children's rights should be mainstreamed within protection mechanisms for human rights defenders, most of which are unfortunately still very much adult-centered. And this is very relevant for the work of NHRIs, for example. We know that some are charged with the task or the mandate to protect human rights defenders, and we are aware of some good practices of some national human rights institutions who really mainstream children's rights within all their work, including those related to the protection of human rights defenders. But there is also need to do more, and to foster collaboration between protection mechanisms of human rights defenders and child rights organizations, for example. Finally, and the last example is civil and political rights. The declaration helps very much to strengthen the very recognition that children are entitled to civil and political rights, in addition to economic, social, and cultural rights. And Article 7 is an example of how this can be done, again, with explicit language, giving the right to children to develop and discuss new human rights ideas and principles, and to advocate for their acceptance, language that doesn't exist in the CRC. And it has, of course, been developed by the Committee on the Rights of the Child in its jurisprudence, but it's not in the CRC itself. And we know that many states do challenge these issues. So before closing, I wanted to share with you that based on our guide, we have developed additional tools, in particular online tools on the rights of child human rights defenders. We have developed a dedicated website that you can access from this link, where you can find e-learning modules for children, among other tools. And one module that is coming up is a module on child rights, on child human rights defenders, and in the digital environment. So because of the theme of this workshop is very much around that, I thought that this is something you can put on your radar, and this is a tool that will be accessible for all, that we hope you can use in your work, in your programs, in your activities. You can include it in there and share it with the children that you work with. We also want to put out a call for interest today, because we have started to use the guide in partnership with national actors, and my colleagues Miliana We'll talk in a second about the work that we have done together in Moldova. But we have also started to roll out the guide more in other regions. And last year we did some activities together with UNICEF Thailand, in the framework of capacity building for journalists. And we have been engaging in discussions with the civil society in Thailand about, again, using the guide to do some capacity building for civil society, bringing together different actors to talk about, reforms of national legislations, policies, how to improve those, using the guide and using the knowledge that we can create together through the guide around the rights of child human rights defenders. We've also used the guide to advance standards, and so at the international level, we have influenced the general comment on digital environment of the CRC committee. We have managed through the guide to strengthen the element of empowerment within the general comment. It was very much focusing on protection, the first draft. And so we did a strong advocacy and came up with strong arguments to strengthen the perspective of empowerment of child human rights defenders online. We are also pushing for more concluding observations, explicitly mentioning child human rights defenders, both with the committee, but also with the UPR. And we are going to organize soon a briefing for states on the UPR. There hasn't been any recommendation on child human rights defenders yet. We are also collaborating very closely with the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defenders, who is really interested and looking forward to receiving individual communication concerning child human rights defenders. So far, there has been almost no communication related to children. The work of the Special Rapporteur has been very focusing on, or mostly focusing on adult defenders. So there is a need to increase the focus on children through that. We're also advocating for the inclusion of child human rights defenders into the UN resolutions, GA, General Assembly, but also Human Rights Council resolution. And we want to support strategic litigation as well, the national level and international one. So I'll stop here because I think I've given you a lot of information, and thanks a lot for your attention.